Okay, it's 6 o'clock, and I'm going to call this April 19th, 2022 meeting of the Chelmsford Select Board to order. Would you please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and just for the record, Board Member LaFave is absent this evening. So first up, we have our public service announcements, starting with the Arbor Day proclamation. You can come on up. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kate Crawford from Chelmsford Garden Club. I'm the Arbor Day chair, and I've been here many years in a row.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will read the proclamation, and you can tell us about the event.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is a Town of Chelmsford proclamation in celebration of Arbor Day, April 29, 2022. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and beautify our community. And whereas trees in our town increase property values and enhance the economic vitality of business areas and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal, now therefore we, the Chelmsford Select Board, do hereby proclaim April 29, 2022 as Arbor Day in the town of Chelmsford and urge all its citizens to protect our trees and woodlands and to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations and to take part in programs to celebrate Arbor Day. Signed this 19th day of April 2022 by the Select Board and sealed by the Town Clerk.
Thank you, Pat. So Arbor Day, we're planning a 3 p.m. ceremony on Friday, the 29th of April, and it's going to be at the Chelmsford Public Garden. This year we're choosing to plant a cherry tree. It's a Quason cherry tree that hopefully will shade the 2 benches to the right-hand side in the public garden. Mm-hmm. I can send or give you each a flyer so you can see it.
Yeah, we've got it up on the screen, too.
And we're thinking of 3 p.m., and we'll all be there, and there'll be some refreshments. We're going to have it, again, rain or shine, because we just can't predict how to have it without. So everybody is invited in town, and everybody certainly from this select board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Kate.
And I'll trade you. I'll give you this.
Pretty, huh?
Okay, next up we have the LGBTQ listening session.
Okay, well, this session, the LGBTQ plus listening session, will be held on May 16th at 6 p.m. at the McCarthy Middle School Auditorium. We invite all residents to come and talk to us about issues, concerns, ideas you might have regarding the LGBTQ plus community. So, thank you.
Okay, and we have one more, which is the bike fitting event.
Okay, the bike fitting event, this is a new event. It's going to be held on Saturday, April 30th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Hart Pond Beach along the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and this is sponsored by Complete Game Physical Therapy. The folks at Complete Game Physical Therapy and the Chelmsford Board of Health will sponsor this free bike fit check, inviting cyclists of all ages and levels to get their bikes checked to ensure proper form and setup and reduce injuries and improve performance. So again, that's Saturday, April 30th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Hart Pond Beach.
Thank you, Pat. Next on our agenda is public input. Do we have anyone who would like to address the board during public input? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on to committee vacancies. Pat?
Okay, as of today, we have the following vacancies. There's one vacancy on the Arts and Technology Education Fund Committee, 2 vacancies on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, 2 vacancies on the CCA Advisory Committee, 1 vacancy on the Commission on Disabilities, 2 vacancies on the Community Action Program Committee, 3 vacancies on the Council on Aging, plus 5 associate member vacancies on the Council on Aging, 2 vacancies on the Cultural Council, 1 vacancy on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, 2 vacancies on the Holiday Decorating Committee. The Parade Committee welcomes all applicants. There's 5 vacancies on the Public Celebrations Committee, 1 vacancy on the Recycling Committee, and 2 vacancies on the Tree Committee. If you're interested in applying for any of these positions, you can fill out an application on the town website or contact the town manager's office.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, next up we have licenses, and the first one is the common vigilar license for Country Creamery and Coffee House. Would you like to just address the board? We just need your name and address.
Peter Moran from 241 Old Westford Road. Good evening. Good to see you all again. So as you see, we're applying for the vitriol license. Do you have the, I assume this has all been reviewed?
Yep. Does the board have any questions?
Site plan, I think he's looking for the site plan.
Yeah, so it's going to.
Paul, what did you say?
He keeps scrolling, he's looking for the site plan. There.
Oh, this one? Yep.
Yeah, a little
Yes,
further.
I didn't know if there was any questions, but basically, there's 2 different versions of the site plan. This one's a little cleaner. That green line, met with Lieutenant Poor and Captain Koutsafas back on March 18th, talking about, safety for pedestrians. As you know, we're turning this into a walk-up ice cream stand, so the side where the green lines is, that's where the windows, the service windows are. So we'll be blocking that parking lot with protective barriers, jersey barriers, to keep them safe, but that's also where we will have some seating, as you can see from the other, I don't know if you want to scroll down to the other. Not the greatest picture, but you can see that parking lot that's circled is going to be the one blocked off with some tables in that seating area. Questions on any of that, or?
Any questions?
Yeah, I just have a question on the letter that was sent to you. It said that this would be exercised on the premises at 272 Old Westford Road, Unit 1. Is there, other than a Unit 1?
No, so there's only one building there. It is, on the tax books, it's 2 separate lots. I don't know if they were referring to it as Unit 1 because of
Okay, yeah,
that.
I guess that could have been, yeah. I didn't.
I was a
know.
little confused by that myself.
Okay. And I guess the other question I had is about the entertainment license. I mean, Paul, do we require an entertainment license for, what kind of entertainment is it, like?
So,
kids?
obviously, we have the large park with all the
Shows.
kids. It's really just kids' entertainment, whether that's, story time or puppet shows or, something on that regards. We don't have anything on the books, but Christina said, if you ever think you're going to do that, then you should put in for the entertainment license now.
Okay, yeah, I thought we had kind of relaxed that a little bit lately, that, but, I mean, yeah, we can, obviously,
It doesn't hurt, I guess.
If it covers it, yeah.
okay, that's all the questions I had.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, if not, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the common victular license and entertainment license for Country Creamery and Coffee House to be exercised on the premises at 272 Old Westford Road, Unit 1, as presented.
Second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Good luck. Okay, next up, we have the one-day alcoholic beverage licenses for the Armenian church. I don't see anyone here from the church, but this is pretty standard, right?
Yeah. We usually just,
Does the board have any questions they need answered? All right.
I'll make a motion that we approve 2 one-day all alcohol licenses to St. Vartanant's Armenian Church for July 1st, 2022, and August 7th, 2022.
second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. What's the next one?
Yeah, the next one is just for the board's consideration, and we expect approval. Since the last meeting, after the governor on April 1st signed the law allowing for the expansion of the outdoor seating and delivery of alcohol and so forth by on-premises locations, we have received the ABCC outdoor alcohol beverage service areas guidelines, for the outdoor seating. And so again, these licenses have been extended to April 1st, 2023. We're getting inquiries, obviously, by parties who want to extend those licenses, and we just want to make sure that this is a local option, that the select board wants to continue this program for another year.
We haven't had any problems with it, have we?
No, it's been very popular and successful, and again, we just don't want to take it for granted because it is a decision by the licensing authority.
And this is also the takeaway of alcohol?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
And I think
I'm
where it
fine
goes
with
beyond this,
supporting that.
where I think it'll go beyond this is at some point it'll become permanent, that we may seek zoning changes and/or outdoor provisions. But this allows the temporary provisions for places such as Max and Leo's and others to continue to operate in the manner which they have for the last 2 years.
The opening of this says on April 1st, 2022. He signed the law for fiscal year 2022.
Yeah,
Is that-
that was the law that, it was baked into the law making appropriations for the current fiscal year,
Okay.
2022. But
Okay.
it extended it, as you can see,
Yep, to
to
April
April
1st,
1st, 2023.
Okay. So you need a vote from us?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we approve the ABCC advisory regarding the expansion of patio service and takeaway delivery of alcohol by on-premises licenses to continue until April 1st, 2023.
A second motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay. We're at reports and presentations, Paul.
Yeah, we have two matters that are timely this evening. The first is from Evan Belansky, who's going to provide an overview of the MBTA zoning communities. There was recently a statewide virtual call where they laid out the rules and regulations, but most importantly, why this is timely is May 1st is the deadline to submit the community information form, which provides benefit to the community, even though it has no change in our zoning, but it just, while this law is being implemented. So, but again, I'll turn it over to Evan, who has the PowerPoint, who can walk us through this.
Sure. Good evening, and thank you. So the reason I'm here this evening is that in order for the community to remain eligible for this year's one-stop grant application, as well as in order to continue to comply with the MBTA zoning, the state has required that the community must hold a briefing to present the draft guidelines at a select board meeting, as well as review the community information form, and to submit that form prior to the May 2nd deadline. So the slide presentation that's in front of you this evening is the exact slide presentation that the state has done via their webinars. I have attended several of these webinars. Several planning board members have attended. And your representation at NIMCOG, I believe, has also received a slide deck presentation. So I'm going to quickly go through the slide deck. Next slide, please. So the state is indicating per bullet number 3 that housing in the state of Massachusetts is really a partnership between the state and the local municipalities. Next slide. The state continues to indicate that there is a housing crisis, and these 4 or 5 bullets articulate the state's position supporting the continued housing crisis. Next slide. This slide outlines the variety of initiatives and actions that the state has taken to confront and address the housing crisis at the state. Next slide. Slide 5 is where the state is articulating the public benefits for transit-oriented development This is a theme that is tied to the MBTA zoning. Some of these themes should be pretty familiar, particularly in Chelmsford, where we do have some village zoning districts in traditional, traditional neighborhoods as well. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines, for purposes of the slide deck, what is to be discussed and what is within the draft guidelines and what is not to be discussed or considered. The draft guidelines, it's important, I'll just pick a couple of these, is that the draft guidelines intend to provide local control using local zoning as a means to provide that local control. The draft guidelines are not intended to provide production mandates or a requirement to build units. It also has nothing to do with Chapter 40B. Next slide, please.
Evan, can I just ask, so right now the guidelines are only in draft form?
Correct. Yep, the comment period ended March 31st, I believe.
Okay.
So the next several slides are kind of the high-level details of the current draft regulations. Section 3A indicates that at least one district of reasonable size must provide for multifamily housing that is permitted as of right, without age restriction, shall be suitable for families with children, shall have a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre, shall not be located more than half a mile from a commuter rail, substation, bus station, if applicable. Next slide, please.
Do we meet those requirements?
So I
Are you
will.
gonna go through
Yeah,
that?
I will mention,
Okay.
right now, that is not applicable to us. The way the state defines bus station requires it to be a formal structure, not a shelter or a bus stop. This slide is an overview of all of the MBTA communities. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, you're going to go back to those requirements that you just read?
They come up in a
Okay.
little bit more detail.
Okay.
So the first criteria is reasonable size. The draft guidelines, per number 1, minimum land area. The district or districts must comprise of at least 50 acres of land, and as I mentioned, must have a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre. That 15 units per acre is based upon further limitations imposed by the Wetlands Protection Act, as well as Title V and other kind of development constraints. The second item is land area and unit capacity. The state has a unit capacity calculation. For purposes of Chelmsford, Chelmsford is identified as an adjacent community. Next slide, please. So as I just mentioned, you see Chelmsford on the map here. Chelmsford is identified as an MBTA adjacent community. This means that we do not have any direct MBTA services in the community, but we directly abut communities that do have direct and dedicated MBTA services. Next slide, please. So this is the formula that the state has come up with as it pertains to capacity. For purposes of Chelmsford, we are an adjacent community. Our 2020 total housing units is 14,769. As an adjacent community, we are required to have a minimum capacity of 10%. That is 1,477 housing units. Next slide, please.
What do we have now?
We have 0 now because none of them would qualify for the MBTA zoning as of right. Next slide, please. This slide outlines the size and density requirements. As I mentioned, the district is to be a reasonable size. The state has further defined that within the draft guidelines. They've also indicated a gross density requirement, which I've mentioned is 15 units per acre. And the districts must satisfy both of these requirements. Next slide, please. The location of the districts, there's two options. One is, the first one is with some land located within a half mile of a transit station. We do not meet that. We meet the second bullet. We do not have any transit facilities as defined in Chelmsford or within a half mile from the border of Chelmsford. The closest thing we have to dedicated transit is the Lowell Regional Transit Authority routes, and those are not defined as MBTA facilities. Next slide, please. So this slide provides visual examples of 15 units an acre. Some are urban, some are suburban in nature. But during the webinars, the state thought this was a valuable visual example.
Evan, can I just ask a clarification question? So this is saying that we would need 1,477 homes that are of a density of 15 units per acre?
It's not saying you need them, it's saying you have to zone for them. So as I mentioned, the MBTA zoning statute, per the legislature, requires a community zone. The webinar is making it clear that it's not a production statute. These units may never get built. It may take a very long time to get built, but the statute is written as shall. And so the draft guidelines that have been issued by the administration is indicating that communities shall zone for this, but they understand that they may never get built.
Is there a minimum number? A minimum number they want?
Our minimum is 1,477 per the formula.
Is there an idea when this becomes not draft, becomes a release guidance?
So the state is in the process of reviewing the comments. There's been significant and substantial comments issued, and presumably at some point in the not-too-distant future, the state will issue final guidelines. And then that will set off a series of likely challenges and...
Yeah.
Do we have a choice on whether or not to accept that we're an MBTA community?
It's written in statute,
I know, it's
Right.
written there, there's no way to,
not unless the state changes the law, but by the definition of the law,
we'd have to take the state to court, basically.
Yeah, I don't know what the basis would be of the challenge, because by the definition of the law, we're an adjacent community to Lowell and Barica that have commuter rail.
Okay.
And if you don't they take away some of your
You lose your eligibility for
tax money,
for
right?
grants and programs, yeah.
So
That's the
like
carrot and stick. yeah.
the sewer upgrade for North or the pipe upgrade for North Chelmsford Water, that was paid by the one-stop grant?
Correct. Correct. So
Okay.
that's the stick.
So you'd almost have to rezone the whole town?
No, I mean, if you,
Larger
no.
parcels.
Yeah. I mean, if, for context, UMass West Campus had 25 acres of developable land on which, 394 units are being located. So for purposes of Chelmsford, that's a pretty reasonable scope and scale where if the town were to advance this initiative, we'd likely have to find, 3 or 4 more 25-acre areas in town. Now, again, when you get into the details of the webinar and so forth, it doesn't have to be vacant land. It can be fully built-out land. And they will require the town to provide documentation that you comply with the formula to meet those baseline criteria. But they make it very clear that you can zone for currently developed land. So they're looking at this as a long-term strategy.
But they're basically mandating that if you don't have the vacant land available, you have to rezone land that's already zoned for something else?
They're saying that's a choice that communities have, yes.
Well, is it a choice or is it a mandate?
How communities go about their zoning strategy is a local decision.
But you're required to do it.
You're not answering my question, though.
Well, you-
My question is, if we don't have any other, so you said the
Yeah, that-
UMass West campus
That's an example.
takes, we would have to have 3 to 4 more 25-acre parcels in town, 25-acre
If the strategy was to find
regions.
vacant land, correct. Otherwise, you'd be looking for 25-acre geographic areas that are currently built. Maybe those areas already have multifamily on them to some extent. Maybe it's areas where the town wants multifamily, where it currently isn't built there.
And so my question is, this, you're saying the state is mandating that we have that zoning in place?
Yes,
By,
through the legislation.
But
No,
The
the
why-
the deadline is
Oh,
2020.
yeah, I'll get to that.
oh, okay.
Yep.
that's
Okay.
what I-
So there's only a couple more slides here.
Yeah.
Next slide. So as part of this effort, the state realizes this is a heavy ask to local communities, so they're providing robust technical assistance opportunities. Next slide, please. This is slide 16, goes into some of the details related to available technical assistance. They're provided directly from the state through grant programs, through Mass Housing Partnership, as well as the regional planning agencies, in our case, NIMCOG. Next slide, please. So in order to comply, we're here for this slide is why we're here this evening. We'll finish the slide deck. We'll transition to the community forum. And next slide, please. This is the timeline. So as I mentioned, the public comment period for the draft guidelines ended on March 31st.
Did we provide comment?
We did not provide direct comment, no.
Okay.
So has the planning board looked at this?
Well, several members of the planning board have attended webinars.
Yep.
The webinars are, they were about 45 minutes to 1 hour each. There wasn't a lot of engagement. State wanted questions and comments put in writing.
How did the planning board feel? They have no comments, so
Right.
how did they feel about our ability to comply with this, I guess, in the most seamless?
So there's been no conversations, and I'm not here to speak on behalf of the planning board or the community. I'm not here to discuss strategy. Unfortunately, that's not really what's being asked of the community at this point. What's being asked of the community at this point, in my estimation, I kind of view this as reserving our rights. If the select board chooses to submit the community form, we're reserving our right to continue to participate and comply. There's still no commitment. And so, to answer your final question, adjacent communities have until 2024 to achieve compliance. So that's 2 years. And during those 2 years, the state is going to be rolling out significant opportunity for technical assistance. Towns will be able to work with their RPAs, hire private consulting firms,
RPA?
the Regional Planning Agency, NIMCOG. So the state is not leaving any community on their own if they so choose to look for paid technical assistance. 2024 is a fairly extended period of time, but I think an ask of this, we're all well aware that this will take a significant amount of time.
So Evan, what you're saying is by state statute, they're telling us we're an MBTA adjacent community. We can choose to do this interim compliance and therefore have accessibility to whatever the benefits of being that MBTA community are, the grants and whatever else there is. And if we choose not to be compliant or to submit this, we're still an MBTA community, but we're seen as a non-compliant one in the state's eyes, and we would still have to do the zoning and all that eventually?
It's not very clear at this
Okay.
point. What is clear is that the draft guidelines clearly indicate that if you're not compliant
Grants and funding.
then you're not eligible for the one-stop grant program.
But
Is
there's
that the
no,
only benefit under this?
what's the downside of submitting the application?
That's why I said, I mean, for purposes of tonight, for the submitting the community information form, I don't see any downside. And that doesn't even get us to the point where the town is formally committing to requesting technical assistance. Let's assume we enter that queue, we get the technical assistance, presumably that's successful, it gets to town meeting. We all know that in Chelmsford, that's the voting threshold. You need town meeting adoption. So, to answer your question directly, I'm not aware of any specific guidance or determination from the state as to what happens in 2024, 2025, if communities fail to get a vote at town meeting, or if they choose not even to advance it to town meeting. All they've indicated so far is that that's non-compliance.
And what other benefits are there besides the one-stop grant? Is there, Something that's
That's it per
articulated that
per
says
the
that-
statute, that's it.
that's it?
Yep.
Okay.
Build schools.
What, George?
Build schools.
Build schools.
You gotta have so many
So it just
three-bedroom
sounds to me
units.
like there isn't really any downside to getting this in, get some assistance, maybe even take a look at what it might look like, once we better understand it, and then make a determination from that point. How
Yeah.
we might want to go, and then if we put it in front of.
Yeah,
town
so I mean,
meeting-
a lot of your questions are fairly high level. If we were having like a work session, questions would quickly get to the point where I wouldn't be able to answer them.
You need the assistance.
So, yeah, so the technical assistance brings in experts who are able, once the final guidelines and regulations are issued, to be able to provide that level of detail. As you can imagine, similar to 40B,
Yep.
these are going to have a lot of guidelines and regulations that are going to need to be interpreted. It goes without saying, there's likely to be areas of conflict and push and pull that continue. So this is the state's webinar, this is their presentation, and this is how they think it's going to play out.
What was our process from December 15th to March 31st? Did we have one where we didn't submit any comments? Did the planning board, you didn't engage with the planning board on
So I can
review?
tell you that
So-
MMA did submit significant comments. The Mass Association of Town Attorneys also, I believe, submitted robust comments. We could have submitted some questions, which a lot of communities did submit. But based upon kind of the nature and tenor of the webinars and the lack of level of specificity, I didn't personally see a need to submit comments either on behalf of myself or the community. And like I said, if you haven't seen MMA's comments, I encourage you to look at them. I think it was like a 18-page memo to DHCD. Okay, so the final slide is just where to go for additional information. There is a lot of information on the state's website, frequently asked questions, other webinars, and some kind of introductory guidance documents. But what I wanted to do at this point was transition to the community information form. So what's in front of you is a blank form, but I've gone through and marked it up. Essentially, 5A on the bottom of the first page.
There's no markups in what we have?
I'm sorry.
You said you marked it up.
Well,
Oh,
I
your
just,
copy.
for my purposes.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I've identified where I think I just need some discussion this evening. Question 5A at the bottom here
Compliance.
indicates, will the person filling out this form also be responsible to ensure compliance with Section 3 or lead a committee that will undertake compliance with Section 3A? So editorially, I'm more than happy to serve in that capacity. But since this form is required to be submitted by the chief elected official, that's something that needs to be discussed. Under Section 2, next page. Number 6, does your community have any land area within a half a mile of public transit? As I indicated, we're going to be answering no, which then brings you to 6A at the bottom of page 2. Does your community have any areas of concentrated development, village center, mixed use? On the top of page 3, we would answer yes. Question number 7, does your municipality have any zoning districts where multifamily development of 15 acres is allowed as of right? We would answer yes. That's the UMass West zoning overlay. So 7A, 7B, 7C, 7D, and 7E, we would all answer. And then the next applicable question is on page 5, number 8. In accordance with the how to comply requirements for the MBTA communities issued on December 15th, you're required to hold a briefing about the draft guidelines at a meeting of the select board. Have you held such a meeting? We would fill that out. Then on page 6, section 3, question 9, is where the community is asked, what types of technical assistance would you be looking for? And I would suggest we would look for, we need technical assistance to draft zoning, and we need technical assistance to calculate multifamily capacity. And on question 10, I would also suggest that we would like to have that technical assistance provided by Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, which is our regional planning agency. And then, as I mentioned on page 7, question 13 is where the CEO has to attest, I'm sorry, on, I think I,
13, yeah.
That's 13.
yeah, is where we need to attest that we've held this meeting, discussed the guidelines, and submitting the form.
So I just want to mention too that, as Evan mentioned, NEMCOG has been, watching this process also, and has set aside some DLTA funds, district local technical assistance, to help the communities with compliance whenever those regulations are closer to finalization, and we know how we can do that.
So I understand that the state is saying you have to bring this to the select board, and they told us that in December. And so now we're like up against the deadline because we don't have another meeting until before this is due. And I mean, I have to be honest with you, it really would have been my druthers to have a conversation that included the planning board and the finance committee, because I know they were asking questions about this too before we got to this point. Because I feel like we're making a zoning, I understand it's just keeping us in play, but this is really all about zoning and financial impact to the town. So we're kind of in a spot right now where we don't really, I think we don't have a choice but to say, let's put the form in, except that, and I'm not comfortable doing that unless we schedule some kind of a tri-board or something, in the next couple months. I know that if the planning board hasn't really talked about this yet, that makes me uncomfortable. And when the questions had come up about some of the FinCom questions during the last town meeting review, I followed up with Jim on that, and, his thought was maybe we should have I spoke to him today, maybe we should have like a tri-board meeting or something to really understand what's going on here and see what we want to do as a community going forward, but involve the three boards that have the most stake in this. And I mean, down the road, if what we have to do is rezone 3 to 4 more parcels in town, that's really going to be the planning board, not the select board.
Well, the Board of Appeals is
Yeah,
gonna
or,
be busy
you
too,
know.
aren't they?
What's that?
Would the Board of Appeals be pretty
it's not
busy?
written
'Cause
in that
you're
way
gonna have to,
No, the Board of Appeals has no involvement.
It's not written in that way.
but if you're gonna go into a particular development, I mean, and then they're gonna add stuff, you're gonna have to change
It
it.
would likely be planning board,
That
similar
would
to
be
UMass
planning
West.
board, Evan. So the form just keeps us in play.
Right.
I mean, how do the other board members feel? I feel like we should schedule something with the finance committee and the planning board to just have a joint discussion about this and understand
So who's looked at it? from
what
the
our
planning-
path forward's going to be as a community.
I believe at least 3 members have seen the webinar.
Yeah.
Paul McDougall, I think saw it through NIMCOG. I believe 2 others were on the same webinar I was on.
But it's never been a topic at
It's
any
never been a
meeting.
topic.
No. And again, you know, I'm here strategically not interested in discussing strategy. And I think there's some benefit to the fact that the community has not had any strategic discussions to date. Simply filing the form and getting in the queue, in my opinion, allows us to bring expertise to that engagement process. Because these questions are very, very quickly going to get technical in nature. And I think we know from experience with UMass West, having a certain level of expertise at the table while the community's in an engagement process is very beneficial. So that's what the state is offering, is that they're not asking in the form, have you already discussed this?
Right, I'm just saying, and I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you to check the boxes that you suggested checking, but I'm saying, by this board saying, yes, let's do that and check those boxes, I feel like we're almost making a decision to go engage with an expert on zoning options that really should be more of a joint decision with the other 2 boards.
Agreed, I agree with you.
And we're in a spot right now where we don't have the time to cycle through and make that happen. So what I'm asking is, if we go forward tonight, that in the near term, maybe we schedule that tri-board discussion, even if there's nothing
Sure.
substantive to talk strategy, but at least get everybody's questions out there. And then, maybe we bring the expert in and then we reconvene again, or we say, okay, this is the planning board, or,
I think at a minimum, the planning board should at least be making the recommendation
Yeah.
to us to go forward.
Right.
That they're
And
comfortable
I'm
with it.
uncomfortable that
And
they're
finance too,
not.
just say, yeah, we're comfortable with it, we've looked at, to go for, I know it looks administrative, but you're right. I mean,
This
this
is-
is gonna
this is
fall
a
back
big
on them
impact.
and you. And I think that we should make sure that they're all comfortable with
Agreed,
this.
agreed.
Okay.
So I didn't view
Cool.
I didn't view the first step of the process
Yeah.
being tonight, meaning any decision was made. That's not the way the state presented it. That's not the way I understood their program and the technical assistance that they're providing. I agree with you 100%. In order for the town to engage in technical assistance, that should come from the planning board. The planning board should give
It's gonna
some
fall to them.
indication. So it's likely going to be the planning board who's the primary entity engaging in that process.
There is.
And if we or FinCom has something that we want them to keep in mind, I think that's better brought to the table earlier rather than later.
Or that they may see something that we
Right,
didn't see,
right.
because we're
Oh,
kind of
absolutely.
just more the signatory. you know.
Exactly.
Do you know offhand, do we have 3 or 4 other 25-acre parcels that wouldn't cause
Well, that's
Not vacant.
consternation in the
exactly why I
community?
asked that
Not
question.
vacant, but we
Yeah.
do have existing multifamily zoning districts.
Right.
Are they big enough?
Likely. There's a lot of multifamily up on Tingsboro Road, Littleton Road, and these are multifamily zoning districts that town meeting created over 30 years ago. Again, they're fully built out under
But-
current zoning standards.
But if they fit,
Exactly.
we might be able to comply without doing anything other than
Exactly.
rezoning.
So the message that I think the board and the community needs to understand is that if the town decides to comply and we zone for it, it doesn't necessarily mean that reality is that 1,477 additional housing units get built. The town strategy may be we zone existing multifamily districts, And maybe those areas have 1,000 units already. But this is where having a consultant, NIMCOG, helping us with crunching the numbers, doing the mapping, doing the calculations is going to be tremendously helpful.
Because even if the planning board took a quick look and said, hey, we've got all these little areas around here, without the technical assistance, you really can't take that
Right, so.
anywhere.
Right.
You really need
So I was
that.
hesitant to talk in a lot of detail because I think it creates more
I
alarm
get
than it's
you.
worth at this point.
Yeah.
Paul, I know.
And a lot of this came up in discussion. Remember when we were dealing with the UMass West campus,
Yes.
and they were doing the development agreement, and it kept coming back, would this comply with the new MBTA zoning?
Yep.
And those discussions were taking place months ago, that was happening. But I think
But that kept getting pushed to the side.
kept getting pushed to the side. And I think what we're waiting for is, we don't have the final guidelines. And the reaction from these draft guidelines has been strong and negative, as you said, multiple dozens of pages going back. I think what happened is the law got put into effect, nothing happened. The administration got pressured to put something out there. They issued draft guidelines, and then they basically said, well, we've got to start the process. So then became this thing, well, if you submit something by May 22nd that you're going to do this, then we'll keep you eligible for funding for 2 more years. And that's really what this is doing tonight, is it's allowing a process to get off the ground, but we don't have the final guidelines. But the other thing that's going to change is there's going to be an election in November, and there'll be a totally different administration in January, and we're going to look to see how that administration
Affects these
with the
guidelines.
legislature moves forward on this, because you can imagine the concerns that are being raised in communities by this act. The other big thing we know in Chelmsford is going to be an issue is sewer capacity. You can zone for 1,000 units, but if you don't have 1,000 units of sewer flow, you're not building anything.
Yeah, if you-
And that all has to-
except that
no, but
we
that all has to be
are
part of-
building on the UMass West campus because they're
Right,
putting
because
their
it's
own
on,
treatment
it's
plant in.
on site.
Well,
But if you're going to build in the town center, or you're going to build in
Right.
Drum Hill or Vinyl Square, you're not putting sewer in.
Well, that's the
because-
first thing I thought of. And
If
did
you were
anybody else already submit that? Because you said there were a lot of concerns that were out there from, MMA, et cetera, and other towns. Has that already been put
Yeah,
out there? I would imagine it had.
The
And
state's response is
Because that's huge.
that where you don't have public infrastructure, it has to
Exactly.
comply with Title V. So the webinar acknowledges, if you actually watch the videos, the questions are asked, and the response is, the guidelines and legislation do not mandate production. They simply require that you zone for it. But there are other factors and constraints that may
Yeah, there
prevent
are.
it from actually happening.
Exactly.
Could be economics, could be environmental, could be financial, could be, infrastructure constraints.
So let me I'm thinking 40B again. But, so this thing goes into place, you zone an area, there's some housing there, but you need more in that parcel. We don't have sewer capacity, so it's gotta be Title V, they gotta do an on-site, but it's cost prohibitive. What happens there?
Nothing gets built.
Nothing.
Just nothing gets built, period.
Yeah.
Okay.
And-
Because,
and-
with 40B, there's all kinds of, blow down all the requirements.
Remember,
and-
Mark, it's
jam it
by
in.
right.
No,
It's by right,
okay.
so the intent is that if a zoning application is submitted,
Mm-hmm.
that it's unlikely to be denied based upon zoning provisions.
Okay.
It may not be approved or be able to be built based upon Title V, wetlands, other,
If that's all in place, that'll be fine.
Right.
That's, would be good protection. Okay.
If some of them are age restricted, like UMass campus, will that affect the rest of the units, just counting on?
so the statute and guidelines specifically indicate that it cannot be age restricted, it must be family friendly.
Right.
You can include an affordability component.
So the
But not-
choice piece is out of that count, yeah.
What's that?
UMass West choice piece would be out of the count,
Potentially.
yeah.
That was my question,
Yeah, exactly.
basically. Thank you.
Okay.
Paul,
well,
I
it
know
is what
that,
it is.
I know I asked this before, and I apologize, I can't remember the answer. Do we currently get an assessment for being an MBTA community from the state?
Yes, on our cherry sheets, we've got MBTA assessments to the community. So we don't cut a check, we don't vote a budget at town meeting, but part of our net local aid is the local commuter, the local commuter assessment for, in our case, an MBTA type of community.
By local aid, the money comes to us?
Yeah, in other words, local aid is two components. We always talk about cherry sheets and local revenues. It's also local assessments. And we do get assessed for regional transit on our local aid as part of the formula from the state. But the key characteristic on this is really the definition in statute.
I just want to, so when you say we get assessed for transit on our local aid, so they take money out of our assessment?
of our net-
Our
of
net
our net
assessment
local
goes
aid.
down?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The LRTA is about 270,000
Yes.
roughly a year.
Do you remember what the MBTA is?
I can pull it up. Let me,
I don't want to drag this out, I'm just curious. And is that the only, I guess, expense or whatever that we see to the town? Is that assessment right now for being an MBTA community?
yeah, let me just pull it right up. So our fiscal year '23 cherry sheet estimates, which are just coming up right now, for Chelmsford. Submit. There's estimated assessments and charges, and for regional transit, we're assessed $272,907 for regional assessments. Under the cherry sheet formula. We're not directly assessed MBTA because we're not an MBTA community, but we are assessed $272,907 under regional transit. But again, the definition of MBTA communities is the statute, not the cherry sheet. But yes, we do get assessed for regional transit in the cherry sheets.
And that includes LRTA as
Yes,
well?
yes.
Okay. So would it make sense before the summer busy months come to maybe invite the other two boards to one of our meetings and just get questions out, or even if we don't, I understand it's early and we don't have a lot of answers right now, but it might be good preparation coming up for the fall. What do you guys think?
And then once the guidelines are...
Is that the right timing?
Then we don't know when they're going to release the guidelines, but once the guidelines are released, then, then the process moves forward in terms of a, plan and strategy and how to address the final guidelines.
So you need this signed by May 2nd?
Tonight.
I'm looking at the form closely. To my surprise, there is no requirement that it's signed. It's simply self-attest that this meeting took place.
Okay.
Okay.
Basically, what they were doing is they're giving everybody an initial pass.
I get it.
That's what they were doing.
Yeah.
Just-
Yeah, well, I think
I
that comes
get it.
back to Virginia's first concern, and just to make sure that we can kind of talk about this before we do make some kind of commitment.
Right.
The irony of the whole thing is our biggest demand is for elderly housing, and this is going to basically eliminate
Discount
that,
it,
right?
yeah.
Well, it can be designed, it can't be restricted, but it can be age-friendly with certain design elements or excluding other design elements.
That would actually have been a good question if it wasn't asked, to have been asked.
Thank you.
All right, you want to move on to the next report?
Well, so just to finish this out, so can you send us the links where the questions are from the MMA? I'm sorry, I just don't even know where to look.
The MMA letter?
You said MMA sent a bunch of questions.
Yeah, I found it
in.
on the MMA website.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Now, do you
Okay,
need a
I can go
vote
find it.
to approve submitting this?
Yeah, I would appreciate that. That way it can be reflected in the minutes, which are required to be uploaded.
And then do we want to poll the other two, the Finance Committee and the Planning Board on, I don't think it needs to be a whole separate meeting. Maybe it's just a discussion at one of our existing meetings.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it needs to be a
To
whole
see
meeting. Yeah.
what date might work in the next,
Right,
To a
yeah,
couple,
right,
3
but-
months?
Yeah, but to submit this, we don't, yeah.
right, but I don't want to delay that
Well,
discussion
just the
since we're
fact that he
making
just
the,
has to certify essentially that we
Yeah.
had the meeting, doesn't say anything else, so
yeah.
it just keeps that process going.
All I'm looking for is
Yep.
a yes, you want to do that.
Yes,
Or no, you don't.
I think we should.
Okay.
It's coming towards us and,
So we'll set up some kind of a tri-board discussion. I'll work with Paul on that. Okay, and Evan needs a vote.
And I think that's why they had this public discussion requirement, is because I think they wanted these discussions to begin to take place in the communities as they're nearing the release of what's to be the final guidelines. Because I had a discussion with Evan about, are we going, and we talked about this a few weeks ago. Gee, will Chelmsford submit comments? And what we saw, or what I saw, and I think he could speak for himself, but I think we discussed this, when you saw the webinars and the questions and the reaction, there was nothing unique that what we didn't hear tonight or what you weren't
That's what I
hearing back from
assumed,
other
too.
communities. So
Yeah.
it was like,
Yeah.
it's being covered, and I think really what this interim certification was a way for the state to keep moving along until they release the final guidelines, because the first initial questions were, in the first webinars, was, well, when's the deadlines? When do we have to have these deadlines and submissions by? And then they come out in the later webinars with, for MBTA communities, it's 2023, and then for the others, it's 2024, and we're gonna issue final rules and so forth. So it's the reaction was sort of universal in terms of the impact from the communities.
Well, I think too, Paul, to one of the points you just made is it would also be helpful if we could have somebody watching what's the timeline. So like if, we don't have another December 15th and then we're here in April with 2 weeks to go.
Yeah.
Like, so that we can kind of stay ahead of it as a
Yeah.
community and as a tri-board if we need to
Right.
do that.
And as soon as the final guidelines come out, we'll shoot them out, and anything else of significance on this.
And did you
Or any
say we
other
don't have a
deadlines that are
sense of when?
coming.
What's that?
We don't have a sense of when that might be?
Because
if it goes beyond the election, this is gonna drag out.
This is dragged out so far.
This is going to go beyond 24.
There's no firm date, and that's why you're not hearing a date, is because
Okay.
they've dragged it out.
Well, I don't know if there was just a
This is-
sense
Yeah, but you're right. The problem becomes is they're heading into an election cycle.
that it's going to start all over
It's
again.
exactly.
So just,
24 is going to be 26.
Okay.
just, one last note. The contact person here, Chris Clutchman, she's from Westford.
Westford, yeah.
She's very responsive. So, we possibly could even invite her to a meeting, but, because she responds to NEMCOG on a periodic basis.
Okay,
Just,
Yeah.
great.
anyway. So, if you want to vote, I'll make a motion that we direct Evan to submit the MBTA Community Information form for the town of Chelmsford.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Thank you, Evan.
Do you want to go on to the climate change?
Yeah, just waiting
zoning RFP?
for,
Yeah, hang on a second. Gotta wake it up again. It seems to have fallen asleep over there. Did the screen fall asleep, Paul?
I don't know. Doesn't say anything.
It's not taking the feed anymore.
Yep,
There we
you
go. Okay.
So I'm gonna provide some background information as to how we got to where we are for tonight's request. So as you may recall, back in part of the FY '22 state planning grant, the town was awarded $30,000 plus a $10,000 local match. $10,000 has already been contracted via DPW for a low-impact development technique assessment. The second remaining $30,000 was earmarked for climate resiliency regulatory audit and action plan. That's what was specifically submitted for the FY '22 state planning grant proposal. Since we've been awarded over the last several months, I've been engaged with the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee for the last several months. We have reviewed and drafted a detailed RFP. The RFP was issued on March 3rd of this year with a deadline of March 25th. It was issued directly to 12 firms. 8 responded via email that they were not able to respond, and we received 1 response from Weston and Sampson. The Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee reviewed that proposal on March 29th. They decided to hold an interview on April 12th, and then that evening, they had their regularly scheduled meeting and voted unanimously to recommend advancing into contract with Weston and Sampson for this purpose. So that's the background. The RFP is to work directly with the Sustainability Committee. The Planning Board has appointed a dedicated member to engage in this process. There will be other stakeholders that are invited into this process. It's a zoning-centric process to identify short, intermediate, and long-term over a 10-year period, strategies, themes, techniques that we can identify, customize for Chelmsford, and then ultimately bring to town meeting for adoption to begin to assist the state as well as the committee's goal to become a net zero by 2050. As I mentioned, this process is zoning-centric. The committee also has a variety of other work items that address the other aspects, non-zoning aspects related to becoming net zero. So they seem very, very excited to begin this process. And I think that over the next number of years, we'll likely have annual articles that weave its way through the zoning process and ultimately onto town meeting for consideration.
Right. Any questions? Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
Good.
Are we looking for a formal vote
Yeah,
to?
yeah, we like your blessing to approve the, confirmation to approve the contract from
I thought you
the
said the
Clean Energy.
committee already did.
Well, they recommend
They
it.
recommended.
Yeah, no, they're recommending, we need your confirmation
our
of the
word.
award.
I know,
yeah.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
I just have one question.
Evan?
Under the task, it said that we assume the meeting will be held virtually. I mean, given that we have so many hybrid meetings, is it possible?
Yeah, we're not locked in on that.
Okay. All right. So I make a motion that we approve, that we award the contract for the climate resiliency regulatory audit and action plan report to Weston and Sampson in the amount of $30,000.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you. And, now we have our town accountant Darlene Luce here to give a update on the finances for the current fiscal year. And fortunately, the news is good.
Some of it anyways. Good evening. I'd like to give you an update on where we are fiscally through the third quarter of the fiscal '22 budget. I'm going to first start off with where we are with revenues through March 31st. The revenues are pretty solid. There's a few line items that I'd like to have seen a little bit better, but from prior year, but doing pretty well. We're about 76.6% through our yearly $149 million budget. The benchmark for that is 75%. So we're just about right where we should be, a little bit over, so that's good. Some of our larger categories that we look at under the local receipts are first is the motor vehicle excise tax that we get. To date, we've done really well. Again, we're doing well. They are 92%, almost 93% collected of the $5 million that we've budgeted to date. So we've got that $4.6 million of collection. We're 6.2% higher than last year. It's a little bit skewed. We did have a commitment that came in late last year that's going to be similar to this year. So the collection actually didn't come in until after the beginning of the fiscal year. So And it's going to happen again. We're going to have a small collection, we're going to have a small commitment, around $300,000. It's going to come in June for fiscal '22, but the collection won't be until fiscal '23. So we're just getting that, it's kind of rolling a little bit. Excuse that just a little bit. So I still think that car sales, I think it's hard to get a car. I actually, myself, personally, just went and looked at a car yesterday, and there is no cars to be had. I'm going to keep
It's
my
hard to
car.
get revenue on cars they don't sell.
There's nothing out there to buy, nothing. So yeah, but we will be getting a smaller commitment in June. We'll be actually getting that not till the next fiscal year. The next one is the local meals tax revenue for the third quarter. We're up on that from last year. So people, again, I think COVID, where people are back out going to restaurants, feeling safe to do that. Don't know what's going to happen within the next few months, but I guess if we do outside seating, people will be doing that. Will be good. So that's up from last year. We're doing strong there. Same things with the hotel tax quarter. We're up from prior year. We do, I think, have some still. So we have some homeless people, homeless sheltering in some of our hotels that are helping with that number also from the prior year. Permitting is strong, but the number looks a little, it's because it's lower than the previous year, but that's because we did receive that one-time $1 million permit from the Thermo Fisher Scientific that we received last year. So that's kind of, but so it's still though remaining strong. I think we'll, I see no reason why we're not going to hit that $1.5 million budgeted amount, because we've already collected 1.2 for that number. Rental income is good because we're back open, renting out the town offices and other things, so the rental's better than we did last year because we couldn't rent out any of the town properties. The number, though, that's not good under local receipts is our investment income. We've had a decline in that. That's really due to the bond market, the way that John Souza, our treasurer, has to report that to me is we do mark to market. So if the market, if the bond market is down, we're seeing a market loss for that quarter. So in March, we did see a significant loss, and that's really due to the unsettling of the worry of inflation, increase of the talk about the Feds might raising the interest rates, and also there's the possibility of maybe it going into a recession. So the bond market, we've seen a decline due to those things happening in the market. So we'll see a positive number there for the end of the fiscal year, but I do not think that we're going to make the budgeted amount there. But that's really out of our hands. It's really just due to the market and what's going on in the market at that time. As always, our property tax collection remains solid. We're doing well with tax collection in there. And then there's the state revenues, state reimbursements on track. And then the other financing sources are just things that we vote at town meeting just to use to subsidize the budget. Any questions on any of the revenue numbers there? Everything really does look strong. I mean, it's the number, we're on the local receipts, we're right about where we were, from budget to actual from last year. So I don't see any issues with the numbers on hitting any of our revenue numbers. And I really just feel that, haven't really calculated that, but we'll see a positive free cash number this year. To go into just where we are for expenditures. The departments all look well. Again, they're right within the expenditure. Ones that are running a little bit high is public safety, our community services. With those line items, if you remember on the warrant coming up for town meeting, we will be doing some current year budget adjustments for those departments. They are running a little bit high, facilities department, things like that. So we'll be making those expenditure transfers in at after town meeting's approval. And that'll help make those numbers look better for those departments. But everybody is running, the departments are all, I don't see any issues with any of the departments at this point through the fiscal year. Everybody should be fine. I did just kind of give you just all of our revolving funds, where our balances are. I think it's good to see those balances. It's not something that I report on all the time. It's not something I send you folks reports every month, but just kind of just to see where we are. And just a little bit, just to kind of show you the senior lunch program. They've got a balance right now of just under $30,000, so they'll be fine through the end of the fiscal year. School lunch, there's $1 million in the school lunch program at this point. They'll be fine there. That number is large, just to let you know, the school lunch. They are taking some of their school lunch money and doing some of the kitchen work. Some of it's being done under capital, but some of it's actually going to be taken from the school lunch program itself.
They also don't fund the school lunch director out of that fund either. That's funded in
Right,
the
it comes
operating
out of
budget.
it's a general fund,
Right,
yes.
so
So this is true, like, well, it's mostly revenues coming in. There's not like tons of expenses, but they did decide that they were going to use some of that money to fund a kitchen project. The other revolving funds are kind of like your sailors' ways and measures with a dog officer. A lot of them are the school revolving accounts, childcare, summer, circuit breaker. So those are some larger numbers you see in there. School choice. Those really are the funds under the school department. Then we have if you go to the next slide, is the reserve for appropriations. Those are things that we vote at town meeting that we take out of. So you'll see at this year's town meeting that we take money from the wetlands and the sewer capacity improvement and things like that. Those are the other financing sources that we use to bring into the general fund to help the general fund fiscally. But those have to be voted. They're reserved for appropriation funds. And the last group of things are what we call donation funds. These are usually citizens will make donations to these. They're private donations, and they have to be used for the purpose that they're donated for. So the skateboard park, the bicycle pedestrian parks, military covenant, those things, they all have to, their money that goes into them, they have to be used for that.
So Darlene, I noticed that we still have funds in there for the civic committee, which we disbanded several years ago. I mean, should that money go somewhere?
Yeah, I can talk with the auditors, and they come in, a lot of times we may have to take a vote, but they can close those out to the general fund.
I mean, it's only, $560, so.
Yeah, I try not to do those until I get approval from I usually ask the auditing firms, they like to know about things like that, and they'll probably want to see something that we disbanded it, and they'll allow me to move that over to the general fund. But those are just some balances. There's nothing in those balances. There's no deficits. Those balances are fine. And they were the same ones. If you go to the last page of it is where we have the North Town Hall and the Center Town Hall that we've been talking about, and their balances and where they are. Any questions on those? That's what we're doing. I think we'll be fine. I can't believe we're going to be going into closing the books again. I feel like I just did that. And the new auditing firm will be in May to start their pre-audit. They'll spend a week or so with us going through that, and then they'll be back in September to do the final audit of the year. But again, I think we'll do fine closing out the fiscal year and having a fairly good free cash number. Should be fine.
Any other
All right.
questions?
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Darren. That's all you have for presentations,
Yeah,
right,
that's it.
Paul?
Thank you.
Okay, so next we have the meeting minutes for the April 7th Select Board meeting. Before we take the motion, are there any amendments? Okay.
Make a motion that we approve this was actually mainly for a reorg meeting, correct?
Yes, that's the reorg meeting, April 7th.
Okay. For our meeting minutes for April 7th as presented.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Then we're up to liaison reports. Mark, do you have any?
Just, I've met now with the, either online, on phone, or in person with the Robertsfield group, and I think we've got the list of things that need to get done in good priority order. We understand the funding.
This is for the trees?
Yes, well, it's for everything.
Okay.
And we've also actually had a site visit this morning to look at the trees. I got an arborist there to take a look at it for them, and I think that process is really, it's on track now, and probably ready to just let it go back to the committee in the town, and let DPW take it back over, so, which
Okay.
they're doing anyway, but reprioritize everything. So I think that's in good shape, and that's it for now.
Thank you. George?
Set.
Pat?
Yeah, I have several things. First, a reminder again about the environmental fair that the library is hosting this Saturday from 12 to 3 in honor of Earth Day. They will be, Girl Scouts will be giving away saplings to until they run out. I don't know exactly how many they're going to have, but if you want a tree to plant, good opportunity to get one there. Recent ribbon cuttings. A couple of weeks ago, there was a Charles Frederick Jewelers that had a grand reopening. They have renovated the entire inside of their store, have a lot of new product in there, so if you have a need for jewelry, Charles Frederick Jewelers is the place to go. Project Compass is a transitional and to independent living program that's geared mainly to youth. They have a facility up in North Chelmsford. They primarily, as I said, are geared to youth, but they do accommodate all ages. In fact, they mentioned that they had a woman there that was in her 60s, so anybody that needs that type of assistance should check them out. And today I was at Code Chef on Summer Street, and it's not about food. It's about a learning center that teaches coding recipes. They focus on problem solving, computer coding, and creativity, and again, they serve all ages. They have a lot of programs going on, so Code Chef on Summer Street. Want to recognize or announce the Chelmsford Police Foundation last week gave several awards. They hadn't had a formal ceremony in a while, so there were quite a few awards. Primarily among them were Lifesaver Awards for actions by several of the officers for in different situations where they did get their pin for Lifesaver Awards, including former Deputy Chief Dan Ahern, Sergeant Frank Good, Officer Robert Murphy, Officer Ryan McCarthy, Officers Ashley Gallant, Ashley Rokos, Keith Lazinski, Ryan O'Keefe, Derek Hill, and Christopher Chipchak. Also, they gave awards to Detective Robert Brown and two civilians, Hans Hugh and Bruce Stebbins, who worked tirelessly on the Judith Chartier case. You might remember this was a woman who disappeared over 40 years ago, and they found her car, and then Judith herself just last year. It was a tragic case, and it was good for the family that they finally were able to close that out. They also gave awards to two dispatchers, Richard Demers and Sean Brewer. These the dispatchers are the first lines of contact when somebody calls 911, and often have to keep somebody on the line and tell them what to do and until the first responders arrive. So both of these gentlemen have been dispatchers with the department for a long time, and so they received awards. And then their last award was for a Civilian Certificate of Appreciation, which was awarded to Pastor Steve Burkett, who retired a couple of years ago. He had served many years as the pastor for the fire department and the police department. And I'm sure everybody knows Pastor Steve Burkett. And then lastly, I want to mention that yesterday, Private Lefebvre and I walked from the Chelmsford Common to North Bridge in Concord. It was a very interesting endeavor, and I especially want to thank the Chelmsford Police Department. They provided an escort from the Common. Originally, it was supposed to have been just to the Carlisle line, at which point the Carlisle police were supposed to come and take over as our escort. Well, somehow the word didn't get to Carlisle in time, so give credit to the police department, the Chelmsford Police, who continued escorting us all the way to Carlisle Center. We definitely appreciate that, because we left here at 4 o'clock, and as you can imagine, even though it was a full moon, it still was fairly dark.
Did you leave Private LaFave in Concord?
Yes, that's where he is, yep. He's still fighting those redcoats.
Thank you, Pat. I don't have anything tonight except to just confirm our June schedule. So we were looking at June 6th being a regular meeting, June 13th being the town center listening session. Have we notified people of that yet?
We will once we confirm.
Okay.
Yeah.
June 20th is a holiday for Juneteenth, and so our next regular meeting after that would be June 27th. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah, as far as I know, yep.
Okay.
Okay, great.
And it is 7:20. I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Thank you.